Hi, and welcome to the Ask and the Answer live stream with Olivia and me, and we've got a few other people coming in a minute. They're just running late because of laptops and all of the rest of it, but we're going to get started now with the introductions and what we thought of it, while we also wait for everybody else to join in. So, Olivia, if you want to start.
Yes, hi, I'm Olivia Savannah, and I'm from the channel Olivia's Catastrophe, and I read the Ask and the Answer a little while ago now, but it is one of my favorite books of all time, like one of my favorite series of all time, and this book in particular is my favorite in the trilogy. I give it 5 stars. So, loved it.
Awesome. I gave this one 4 stars, if I remember rightly. I think I enjoyed The Knife of Never Letting Go just that tiny bit more, but I still really like this one, and I really loved where this one went, and that cliffhanger has got me. I won't lie. I am desperate to read Monsters of Men as soon as physically possible because I need answers immediately.
The first one had a cliffhanger. This one has a cliffhanger.
Chunky books with cliffhangers are evil in my mind because I'm like, I don't have time to read the next one. That's really big. The next one's TBR is massive already. Yeah.
I love how with this series they just get better, like 1, 2, 3, bigger.
Yeah. Hi, Hannah.
Hi.
Hi, Hannah.
How's it going? Not too bad. We were literally just discussing our spoiler-free thoughts on this. So if you want to give us your thoughts.
Buck wild. I gave it 4 stars.
Nice. I also gave it 4 stars, and Olivia said she gave it 5.
That's fair. I there's nothing I can fault, but I think the absolute impact slap in the face of the first one and the fact that it made me cry, which automatically makes it 5 stars, didn't happen with this one.
Mm-hmm.
But I only finished it 20 minutes ago, so I feel like I'm still rating it as well.
Yeah. I mean, this one does need a lot of processing, especially all of it. I don't even know which bit needs processing more, to be honest, because there's just so much of it where you're like, that just happened.
Mm-hmm.
That's a lot. I'm going to have to compartmentalize that and figure that out later.
Yeah. I think what made me love this one in particular was themes. I do think the first one also had really important themes as well, but keeping it spoiler-free, I liked... Actually, that's hard to talk about spoiler-free, but I do like the themes in this one. And in the first book, because I wasn't here for that live show, I really liked the secondary characters, but I wasn't a fan of the female main character. And yes, I wasn't a fan of Viola. And for Todd, I really liked him, but I didn't love him. But then in this book, I particularly loved Todd, and I started to like Viola in this book.
Why didn't you like Viola? Just out of interest.
I felt like she was a little bit condescending and know-all to Todd, which is understandable because Todd needed to learn. He didn't know as much as she did. He needed to learn a lot of things in the first one. But I just find when someone's unlearning something, the way that you help them unlearn and learn is really important because you don't want to put them off that journey. And I think sometimes Viola was a bit too Viola in how she approached that.
Yeah. Then again, she is only 14, so.
Yes, and I mean, Todd's also young. They're young.
Yeah, that's peak condescending, slightly sarcastic, age. So, right, sorry. Just had a message from Abby. All right, okay. Abby's possibly going to be missing this. It's absolutely fine. I've got a few of her comments here, so I can sort of talk about those in a minute. Right, there we go. As we were saying, sorry, I was just replying to Abby quickly. What were we saying?
That peak condescending Viola, that age.
Peak, you think you know everything, but you really don't. But also they've been chucked into a very difficult situation, so I can kind of see also why she'd be so frustrated in the first place.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I get it. Definitely. Yeah. Right. I don't think there's anything else we can really discuss in terms of without spoilers. So we just jump straight into spoiler section.
That's
my favorite bit. My favorite bit.
Right. Spoiler section. Let's rip the plaster off. Where do we even start?
I want to start actively towards the end because there were things that happened that I was like, Susanna Collins, is that you? And then was like, I've just looked it up. So there is a bit where Mistress Coyle, who is both antagonist and protagonist, which I love. I love a character that's like, no, my fight is for this reason. I'm gonna piss off everybody. Love that. Very much a kind of morally grey anti-hero vibe. Here for it. She bombs certain things, and it's all for like mass gain. And then obviously the Spackler then bombed. And obviously it's not her that's done it. Because what does she gain from that? Like, she's already said that's of no use to her, but it is something that the mayor/president clearly thinks he can use to like manipulate people. And I was like, that is very Mockingjay. Like, that is almost verbatim what happens in specific scenes. So I looked it up to see like who came up with that idea first, because I wasn't sure if there was like a massive gap. The books for the Hunger Games and Chaos Walking came out beat for beat each year. So Hunger Games and Knife of Never Letting Go came out in 2008. Catching Fire and The Ask and the Answer came out in 2009, and Mockingjay and Monsters of Men came out in 2010. So these two people, like, knowing that publishing, if something happens and like the book is like a year later, like chances are that was already in the book because they're already working on it. The fact that these two people had the same idea in vacuums separate but inspired by, I want to know what the hell happened in 2007 that made people go, oh, sometimes bombs are let off by our own governments to make it look like something's happened to someone else. And I'm like, yeah, that happens. That's terrifying. Yeah. So yeah, I just thought it was really fascinating. Like, my brain, it was one of the few times towards the end where I was like, dystopias really be dystopian.
Well, speaking of the Hunger Games, I read this and then about 2 days later jumped into Sunrise on the Reaping. So I was in the trenches of dystopian, what the hell is going on? My heart has snapped in two. You know, I was in the trenches of it this month, to say the least.
The trauma trenches.
It was all worth it, but I was in the trenches, to say the least. My God. But I won't go on about that in case anybody else wants to read it and they don't want spoilers. But yeah, this book was definitely that ending and everything going on with, I nearly said coin and coil as well.
This is it. It's like the similarities. They're so, and like also in this one we have like a love triangle of like someone that I care about because we've been in the trenches together from day dot versus someone who we're working together for a common goal type scenario. And I was like,
this is so interesting because when I read it, I didn't put it next to the Hunger Games at all. Mostly because when I read it, it consumed my whole life and it was the only thing I could think about. But I do think right now, like, Hunger Games is a hot topic right now, which brings it closer, because you're also reading it right now, like brings it closer to that comparison point. Even though they came out in the same year, I read this several years after I read the Hunger Games. So for me, I wasn't thinking about them in the same headspace. But now that you put it that way, like, there's a lot.
There's so many parallels. And it's probably why we enjoy both series so much, right? Because and I'm really glad I'm getting to this now. If I had read this at the same time that I'd read Hunger Games, I would have dismissed this series because I'm really bad for being like, no, I read this series first and I'm loyal as hell to it. And this is too similar. And sometimes it will get into like my own head about it of like, that's too similar. So like Truth Witch was fine. Didn't love it. It was made worse by the fact that the opening is almost word for word the same as Serpent and Dove, which I hated. So I'm like, well, this is
either of those books.
Yeah, like immediately disliked. So I feel like actually coming back to it, I can make the parallels, and I'm like, okay, these are tropes I can get on board with, as opposed to like I've read this book back to back, whereas I know other people will read like 8 romance books and it's all the same, like they love it all kind of thing. Which, yeah, I can totally get behind. I think it's really nice that there are some parallels. What's terrifying is those parallels are what make them dystopias. And there were like moments in it when I was like, Handmaid's Tale, who? Like, there's things in it that are so dark and but they're dark because they're so real. And that is why I so very rarely read dystopians, because I'm just like immediately, I'm like, yeah. The truth hurts kind of vibe. So, but no, I did really, really enjoy it. Was there like a specific thing for you? Because like, so Becca very kindly messaged me about certain things that might trigger me, which actually did not trigger me nearly as much as they probably should have, which I don't know if that makes me more or less psychopathic. But one of the things that Becca messaged me about was animals or animalistic creatures dying. Now, I'm assuming, Becca, that was the spackle.
Yes, if I remember rightly.
Yeah. That made me sad. I'll be honest, Banshee was worse, like by a country mile. And that made me feel like maybe I care more about animals than I do human beings, which is a thing. But that whole scene I thought was really interesting because it's built up from such a place of kind of like concentration camp level manipulation and control and authority that it's trying to get you to empathize with people who do terrible, terrible things. Like Todd doing that is as low as it can go. But of course, the more he does those things, the more the president can manipulate him. Because if he can do those terrible things, what other terrible things can he do? And it's really foreshadowed by their torture technique of, I'm going to hurt you and then I'm going to make you feel better. And then I'm going to hurt you again and I'm going to make you feel better.
But what was really interesting about that was that I nearly called him President Snow then. Apologies. I'm going to keep on calling him the mayor because I refuse to call him the president. I call him the mayor. But if you notice, he never actually hurt someone. He makes somebody else do it, and then he comes in with the healing every single time. So he's basically like, not to quote the Avengers here, but to be like a balm for the hurt at the end. You know, like when Loki's to Black Widow, that bit. Yeah. You know, like it's that kind of feeling where like he's supposed to be like the nice guy, and you endear to him because he's the one doing the nice thing when he is clearly the one controlling this. But he's so psychologically manipulative. There were points.
It's gaslighting to the 10th degree because at that point, we can all see what he's doing. People experiencing it can see what he's doing, and there's still no stopping that level of manipulation. There's no fixing that.
But I think there were points as well where it was almost like you were reading it and then going, but is he actually the bad guy? And you're like, no, he is. He definitely is. But you almost... No, it's sort of like how he's being like the nice guy and he's being like, no, I'm not doing any of this. It's all them. And
I'm too type A for that.
Well, there was a moment where it's like, could the president, I should say mayor, can Mayor Prentice change? Like, there's a moment where you think maybe Todd can get through to him, maybe, but then, like, no.
Yeah.
I think it's really sweet that you both thought that. And I'm clearly far more cynical than both of you, because anytime the mayor was even a little bit nice to him, or like thing is, for me, the thing that was key was how he treated his son. And like, obviously he says later on, he says later on about how important it is to make sure you don't care about anything enough for it to be used against you, etc. There was no way Davy was ever getting out of this book alive.
True, but I think what I found with like Davy's character and like how Davy and Todd interacted, it was a very interesting comparison to how the mayor and Todd interacted, and the trajectory of like, could Davy change? And when I was reading the book the first time around, I was like, there's Davy's like he's past gone healing, he can't change. But I think seeing like Todd and Davy's journey and then Todd and the president's, it almost makes you believe the president can change more, because you can see how Davy can change. And because I thought Davy, like, I wrote him off very quickly, I was like, if someone like Davy can change, it means anyone can change. And I wouldn't have put it past Patrick Ness to add that complication into the story, because I feel like one of the key themes here is that, like, who are the real villains? Are we all the villain? Are there people that are worse?
Everyone is the villain.
Yeah.
I guess I can see your argument on that. I find villain arcs and redemption arcs the most interesting. And I think it was really interesting that Todd was kind of going through a bit of a villain arc. Like when he beats up that spackle for no reason other than he's just hurting about Viola. That is classic villain arc moment, right? Like he's giving in to every bit of training the president or mayor has thrown at him. Davy, I think it's really interesting because it's foreshadowed very early on that part of the reason the mayor can't stand him is because the mayor can't control him in the same way, that he's not able to pick up these skills in the same way. And that he distances himself from Davy quite a lot. Like he keeps Davy in a stable, which is very telling on how you feel about your son. Whereas Davy, as much as he had very little empathy, he learns to stretch that muscle, and he stretches it in very specific ways. He doesn't read Todd's journal, really. Like he hasn't touched it, he's just got it. It's classic bully mentality of I've taken the thing, but he hasn't damaged it, he hasn't done anything to it. It was a power trip just to take it. Killing someone by accident as opposed to on purpose and feeling the shame for it, things like that I think were more telling. Whereas the mayor never let anyone in. It was always about control, and that level of psychopathy I don't think has the capacity to change. I think you can be messy and you can improve and you can get worse and you can fluctuate and yo-yo, which is very much the journey that Davy went on, and that's fascinating. For me, it didn't matter whether Coyle was also a villain. There was no way the mayor was coming out of that in a redemption arc for me. There was nothing, there was no moment where I sat there and thought, could he? Would he? Like, is that when the other mayor...
But do you want to... But then that's the question of, like, if someone's bad, do you just want to write them off and condemn them? Or do you want to always have the capacity to think, maybe there's something we can do? I feel like that was the question he was mostly playing with in this one.
That's fair. I think I wrote him off.
I think is valid. I mean, in real life, I would have written him off. Like, my favorite villains... No, not my favorite villains. The most evil villains that scare me the most are like Queen Lavanna from the Lunar Chronicles and May Apprentice, because they are manipulative, and I think manipulation is one of the scariest tactics.
Because it's so real, isn't it? Like it's a case of like getting people on side, creating that like herd mentality in a really callous way. Because it also, like, one of the things that I found fascinating about it is he really plays on convenience, and like one of the things that he really like judges the first mayor of Haven for is how like cushy the life has got and how soft it's made him. And he uses the word soft like it's a negative thing, that by living out and being strict on himself, which is very very kind of allegorical, like very kind of like religious imagery in the way like some like Catholic teachings have been prior, things like that. Do you know what I mean? And I think
it's also very Trump.
yeah, exactly. But it's the idea that it's not quite biblical. It's not quite saintly, but he preys on people who don't fully understand, and he preys on their need to just get by passively, survive, and to control them. And I I was levying the stuff. I was alleviating these woes for you, and she's made it worse. She's made it impossible for us to feel safe, regardless of the fact that actually he had invaded. Like he was not invited. He rocked up with a militia and took over. But he's not the bad guy. He's a nice guy, and I'm like, no, like to be fair, maybe that's it. Maybe he just has real nice guy vibes. And I just, I don't know. For him specifically, I just didn't see a redemption happening. I think it would be really interesting if in the next book something like that happens. But I don't think there's any good people in this book. I don't mind that. I don't think there's any good people in this book.
But also, how do we feel about the fact that he can control his noise and use it against people like he does? Because that was also quite scary in the sense that he can control people in that way. You know, not just with his words, but with his actual mind.
I want to know how he did that the first time. Like, what was the thing? What was the instigator? Was it something that he always thought he could do? Or was it that one day he just lost his shit at someone and or thought, you just need to shut up, and then they did? Do you know what I mean? Like, how did that happen? That's the origin story I want to know.
So at the same time, how scary would that one be? To see a man who is already incredibly controlling, then realizing he's got this power.
Yeah.
You know, because then you'd just see him descend further into what is essentially Prentice Town.
Yeah.
And that would be a very depressing read.
Mm.
Yeah, but I don't mind a depressing read.
You're ready for it. How did we feel about
the next one?
I
said that sounded ominous for the next one.
No comment. How did you guys feel about the crossover between the spackle and like indigenous and race and oppression?
That was incredibly cleverly done, I will say. That was very done. And Olivia, I don't know if you like felt the same way, but when they said they cut off their noise, I was reminded also a little bit of the Ood, where, you know, when on the Ood planet where they've taken away their brains, so they are essentially slaves. It felt very much like that originally, and then I went, oh no, wait a minute, this is actually real world stuff. And that's when I started going, yeah, this was, first of all, incredibly like ahead of its time in terms of talking about this. I don't know if that's actually true or not. I wasn't really reading books around that time. I was very much sort of off reading at the time, so I don't know if more books were doing that or what, but so correct me if I'm wrong on that one, but it felt very sort of ahead of its time in that way, and also incredibly sort of like adult in a lot of ways, the fact that he was talking about these things in what is a sort of YA book to really bring up these topics and stuff. And I was really glad he did, actually, because obviously these are things that like are really important to learn about, but it was also really quite scary to see how quickly he devolved into it, and then finding out that Haven was doing the same thing. And being like, oh no, we also did it, but it was fine, they liked it. It was like, whoa there.
Hold up.
No, they did not.
Hold up.
Yeah.
I think it's really interesting anytime a science fiction book looks at colonialism through the lens of making the subjugated an alien, because the way he describes them is very specific. Like the idea that their skin looks like bark, that they live in rags, that they have their children in slings across their bodies, but other than that, they're not wearing very much. Things like that is very openly pointing and lamplighting in a certain way. I think there are times when that frustrates me because it's lamplighting rather than actually saying one way or another what his view on it is. But actually, I think the fact that Todd empathizes and they don't roll over, there is it 1017 that just is constantly standing up and trying to find ways to mutiny and like not eating his food, for example, because he's worked out that that's where the cure is. And you know, doing the work but moving closer and closer and constantly thinking about the violence that he wants to commit against Todd, and Todd not really begrudging him that, like understanding, and still going out of his way to try and save them and protect them, even in this really harsh place, I think is really interesting, because I think like he calls out perfectly when the mayor goes, "Oh, I was just following orders," and stuff like that. And there are small rebellions by Todd, but they're too small. And I think that in itself, as part of the narrative, is really interesting, because I think it's very easy for any white author or white person to sit there and go, "Oh, well, I'm reading these books and I'm learning these lessons," and they're not actually actioning anything. It's nice when you can see it and it is being actioned and it is thoughtful and considered, and not just, I mean, it absolutely sucks that even on this planet there's still no freedom for anyone except the one person. That sucks, and like that's sad. That got me more, I think, than the massacre itself, was the idea that there was this one, the strongest one had to survive. Of course it was him. Like, that sucked, because it kind of meant, well, so long as we can empathize with one person, I guess it's okay. Like it that was a hard read.
And I feel like it felt very intentional, that commentary. I agree with you, Becca. I think this was really ahead of its time. I have to admit, I loved the dystopian genre. As a teen, I read them all, including this one. I've never read one of the teen dystopians that really talked about race or discussed it. Like when we recreated, when they made films of the Hunger Games, they added all different races. And when they did Divergent, they made it quite diverse. But in the books itself, it's not actually acknowledged. And this is the first one where I was like, oh, maybe there's like an indigenous group of people or a very different group of people. The only other books I've seen with that have been like Adult and Octavia Butler with a Black person in a dystopian. So I was like, it's very interesting. And I think it did a good job of looking at the different layers of it. Like, I guess it is ambiguous, which makes it a bit wishy-washy sometimes when it's not more specific. But then I also kind of understand that I feel like he's trying to talk about big concepts rather than one thing in particular, because I feel like you could also align it to the Holocaust, as you said, like the concentration camp side of things,
like branding them, putting the like tags on them,
separating men and women.
Yeah, exactly. Segregation, things like that. And also the idea that it doesn't just stop with this one thing, that it expands into women, it expands into the children, like, and eventually it expands into the men. That there is no, when it comes to that kind of authority, colonialism doesn't stop. It doesn't just go, okay, well, now that we're separate and now that we're controlled, it ends there, because the vacuum has to be filled. So I think I do think it handled it really sensitively. And I think the ambiguity, you're never going to win, because either he says it straight out that this is a race thing, and then people go, "Sir, I don't believe you're a man of color. I don't believe you should be commenting on this." Blah, blah, blah. Or you don't comment on it at all, and actually it's like, well, you should be commenting on it because it affects real people.
You can't win.
No. So I think how he's handled it in these books is exactly what it needed. I want to see more of the spackle rear up. I want to see that, but that's because I want to see the totalitarian government brought down in any shape. And I always champion the underdog. It's really interesting that in this instance they did have something as powerful as language taken away from them first. Like, that's the first thing he takes from them, because it's very, and like the fact that in the city he's also burning books and things like that, but later he understands that knowledge is power. He understands that if they can communicate with each other, something, and that obviously the more they click at each other, the more language they're gaining. That's when he has them destroyed, because they are starting to gain power. They are starting to rear up again, as they should. Like, when that happens, then his only option is to subjugate them again. I thought it was a really great take. And I think that one of the best ways of kind of expressing that is it helps everyone understand the empathy that we should have for everybody else, as opposed to, like, it's not preachy. It's not telling you, be nice to your next person. Like, be nice to your neighbor, be nice to everybody, which is a really, like, placid way of, like, telling people that, but showing through Todd's mistakes that he makes and lessons that he has to learn. Because, like, one of my biggest bugbears is when a sequel teaches you the same lesson as the first book.
Yeah.
So in this series, the first book, yeah, exactly. In the first book, we learn that Todd knows nothing. Everything he believes is a lie. And in the second book, he knows it's a lie, but the lie is so easy to live with because it's easier than fighting for the truth. And when he feels like he's got nothing left, the lie is all he has. And it's not he's learning not to, the lie is not there, but it's combating the lie. It's the fact that he never really calls the president in his head. He's always the mayor. He's already, like, you know, he's picking up on clues from people that things aren't right, and he's still pushing back, but he's exhausted. And I'm really annoyed at myself that I didn't write it down, because there was a really great quote in, like, chapter 37 or something, where they talk about how exhausting it is to constantly fight against the truth of a situation, and how sometimes it's easier just to submit and just go with it because that's how we survive. And I was like, oh, that is so apt. That is so, like, years later, still true.
One thing that also got me was how the mayor also kind of used Todd's need for, like, a parental figure as well. Because he kept on saying, oh, yeah, you're going to be like a son to me. You're like a son to me. You're going to want to be a part of this and things like this. And he was trying to sort of bring Todd in that way. And he was kind of using Todd's loneliness while still isolating him from everybody, apart from the old mayor who was a spy. To be fair, I didn't see that one coming, I won't lie. But
Didn't or did?
Didn't. Look, my brain has been all over the place this month. Sometimes I miss the clue. But seriously, sometimes I need the clue in a neon sign. Right.
I don't think there's anything wrong with not seeing the clue, though. I feel like in this book, there's so much you can be trying to think about or predict that inevitably something is going to surprise you.
Yeah, I think it has to, otherwise it's not well written. Yeah.
Yeah, to be fair. But I also love that he absolutely separated Todd from everybody, but he still let Todd try to go to Viola and then used Viola's escape against him. To be like, oh, look, he's letting him believe that she's left him and all of this kind of thing. And it was really interesting to see how he sort of not loudly manipulated that, but he just subtly let him think that.
But it's subtleties that are dangerous, right? Because, okay, so if we don't suspect that the mayor is a threat, that he is a spy, the mayor of Haven, the reason Mayor Prentice is able to do that is because he hands Todd a key to lock the old mayor of Haven back in when he leaves. He makes Todd his own captor. What on earth could the mayor of Haven have if he's able to, like, get in and out, and Todd has no idea? If Todd thinks he's locking him away, he doesn't see him as a threat. We don't see him as a threat. When he was first, like, locked in there with him and then still locked in there with him, my first thought was, this guy has had it too cushy for too long. He is absolutely going to betray someone at some point. But that is because, again, I read a lot of mysteries, and I feel like that's like the reader or the writer in me was like, well, that's how I'd write it. And I thought when Todd then mentioned that he had the key and he locks the guy back in, I was like, that's really interesting because it makes him less of a threat. And what has the mayor of Prentice done this entire time? He's made himself look unthreatening. He is the flower which hides the serpent. Like, he's the smiling face. And then Hammer comes in and kills everybody because he's a sadist. Well, you're a sadist too. You're just better at it. Like, it's that kind of vibe. So I think, yeah, I think it's definitely the mystery in me that was just like, suspicious. And the key also suspicious. Whereas Davy, bless him, was just not very bright. So it was like, I was like, he's either going to redeem himself or he's going to betray Todd to save himself and his dad. Because
I thought he would do that. Well, Timmy was really like, Davy's going to do that. And then he didn't. And that was like the biggest twist to me, because I was like, oh my gosh, people can change. I was like, what?
Yeah. See, I was, when it was getting towards those ending chapters, I was thinking, right at the beginning of the book, I was like, there's no redeeming Davy. There is no redeeming him. Towards the end of the book, I was going, is he actually going to help Todd out? I was wondering if he was going to go against his dad, because I thought he was getting towards that point where he was going to start to see that actually things aren't okay, and that he's also been lied to and used and manipulated, that he was actually going to help Todd out. Especially when all the ships and everything else started landing, I was like, is he going to change? And then his dad shot him. I was like, are you kidding me?
Probably because with a little more time, he would have. And that's terrifying. To someone who wants to have complete control, you know, he never really saw his son as a threat. But I think the moment Todd, he realized what a hold Todd had over him, the disappointment that Davy felt. And also, can we talk about the parallels between Davy and Manchi at that moment of Todd literally being like, I'm going to have to sacrifice this thing to save Viola? Sucks. But I think that's when the mayor decided, my son can't live anymore. He's of no use to me anymore.
Speaking of those parallels, it's just hit me. But do you think the mayor thought of Davy as kind of like a Manchi, in that kind of, he's an annoying thing I've had to be stuck with, and now it's time to put it down?
Yeah.
Do you think he dehumanized his own son that far?
Absolutely.
And he was a Manchi type character? Because obviously Todd was like, I didn't want the dog in the first place, and now I'm stuck with it. And I kind of feel like maybe Prentice wanted him originally in that kind of following on in the family lineage kind of thing and having like an heir, and then Davy turned out like he did, and he sort of stopped thinking of him as a son, but more like a Manchi pet type thing.
I don't know if Mayor Prentice knows how to humanize anyone or anything. I don't think he sees anyone as anything other than a means to an end, a tool to be used, or something to be manipulated. Can I ask, what was with him insisting Viola call him David?
Yeah, that felt creepy.
It's the creepy nature.
It felt grooming-y in a way. It definitely felt grooming. Even if that wasn't the full thing he was planning, but maybe of the, if I control Viola, I control Todd kind of thing. Puppet on trip. But
I think he was always pitting people against each other, and he knew that by sucking up to Viola to some degree, it would be something to pit against Todd as well, like just another element.
But
I also wanted to ask, because I read this as a teenager, and there's always this debate about what is too dark for teenagers to read. Do you think this is too dark or too complex for teenagers to read?
I can't talk on this because I was watching things like Blade when I was about 10, so my idea of what's appropriate is very much warped. So,
I mean, my mum, the first recommendation of a book my mum ever gave me was Flowers in the Attic, which in hindsight feels more like a threat than a recommendation. So again, to be fair, I am not one for censoring what people read. We had a book club recently, and I recommended My Sister the Serial Killer to a 14, 15-year-old. All the crime thrillers that she's read before have been teenager ones, but they're quite dark. And I thought, actually, this is not as dark, but it is for adults. So it has themes of a certain sexual nature. It has obviously violence in it, lots of blood, lots of gore, and serial killers. She loved it. Like, she loved it, because of course she did. It's fantastic. But I was hesitant because I was recommending it on school premises, which is not a problem anymore. But it was one of the things where I was like, I need to be careful. And then I saw that in the school library, what was the book that I saw that I was like, you have that? And I can't remember what it was. It might have been a Katie Roberts. It might have been Neon Gods or something. And I was just like, huh.
Well,
and I get the impression that the librarian just picks books that she's seen on the internet that look fun.
Yeah.
And I'm like, she doesn't know what that is. That's
Well,
fine.
if it was Neon Gods, you'd still be teaching teenagers consent in a very explicit but good way.
Exactly.
But
so,
also.
yeah. So I think for me, I mean, I saw a quote from Jacqueline Wilson recently that was like, people always say I write traumatic books. I don't. I write the truth.
Mm-hmm.
And I think sometimes it's a lot easier for us to digest something in film, in theatre, in books that is true. This happens, and we can process it in a safe way. And I think that is healthier than saying you should avoid this topic until you're of an age deemed by that it's acceptable, because actually people mature at different rates at different speeds. And I think if I had a child, I would rather they learn about concentration camps and oppression and slavery and patriarchy through the form of a book than in practice, which is a luxury for so many people. Do you know what I mean? So I think that's kind of my stance on this. It is super dark. The pacing of it and the way it's handled, I think, is with sensitivity and care because of the writing, because it's mass produced. I think that's important.
And it's fictional.
And it's fictional, yeah.
You can, I mean, we draw very obvious parallels because we are adults. And I did read it as a teenager, and I also drew those parallels, but not all teenagers will draw every single parallel. No. I agree with both of you. Also, we all of us here read things that people consider adult when we were teens. So I think that goes to show that teens, like, by example, this goes to show that teens can handle these themes because we could. So they can.
Absolutely.
And we all take that, right?
We did, right?
If you could put that in writing and give that to my therapist, I'd really appreciate it. Thanks.
I had another question. I think a lot of this was also about trust. I don't think I've read, well, at the time, I hadn't read a book where we had the two main characters spend so much time apart from each other, but what they each said and did impacted each other so very much. Mm-hmm. How did you feel about, like, did you think that Todd could always trust Viola? Do you always think the trust was there between them? How important do you find trust?
I think Viola trusted Todd more. Just because of the way Todd, this is just coming to me now, so apologies if this is a little bit rambly, but I'm speaking off the top of my head here, but because Todd, how he was raised, where he wasn't around other people his own age, because they all excluded him as soon as they turned 13 and turned into a man and everything else, he hasn't had anyone to rely on, so he's kind of used to relying kind of on himself. And I think he kind of assumes that everyone is going to leave him because that's what everybody else did in Prentice Town. So I think it wasn't that he'd never trusted Viola or lost that trust in her, but I think he kind of maybe was going on that previous assumption that everyone will eventually leave him and betray him and this kind of thing. Whereas Viola was more trusting of Todd and more believing in him just because of the way she's been raised, which was in a much more loving environment. I don't know if that quite makes sense. Oh, good. Is that just
you explained that really well?
Yeah, I think it's very apt. I think if we look at it psychologically, he has had to learn. I can't remember what the phrase is, because there's independence, interdependence, and codependence. I think is like when you're a toddler, there's like the three modes. So independence is that you will actively kind of like go off and do your own thing. And it's probably the most healthy, but it comes from a balance of being socialized, but also having that support structure. Interdependence is a little more difficult to manage. It's normally the kids that don't want to go to school or don't want to go to nursery and then don't want to come home because that change is the issue for them. Like they don't feel supported, but they do socialize in a way that helps them manage it eventually in their own way. So it tends to be the kids like us who will be left alone, so we go and read kind of vibe. And maybe we actively sought that, or maybe it was just a case of, like, in my household, I've been talking to people about Christmas, really going off on a tangent, but I promise I have a point.
Hey, we made it 45 minutes before we did, so we're doing better than last.
It's because Emma and Abby aren't here to distract me. So
bad influences.
Absolutely. This Christmas, I spent this Christmas with Zach's family, and they are boisterous, they are noisy, there are a lot of them, they drink a lot at Christmas, and I did not realize how much having an accountant as a father really impacted me, because for me, Christmas is a very quiet affair because tax returns are due in a couple of weeks. So it was a case of my brothers would be given games, whether it's Xbox games, board games, etc. I would be given a book, and we would be expected, once we'd had our Christmas dinner and our presents, to sit quietly and manage our own time, whether we were at my dad's or at my nan's or whatever. And it was really jarring to then be like, oh, you have a really noisy Christmas. And I think you are hitting the nail on the head in the fact that they have very, very different experiences. And what Mayor Prentice is using is codependence. He is making both Davy and Todd codependent on each other. Neither of them have had a friend, and now they have each other. And whether it was just that he was using them to manipulate each other, or just, I'm hoping my son will help you be more of a sadist, and I'm hoping you'll help my sadist son be more of a human being so that I can manipulate both of you, whatever it is. He is creating that codependence in them. He's putting them both in a situation neither of them are familiar or comfortable with. Whereas for Viola, who in theory has not been awake for very long, having like come out of her stasis state to then arrive and scout with her parents and then lose everything, you're right, she is able to trust a lot quicker and a lot more sturdier. For Todd, it feels like the ultimate betrayal because she made a promise, and Ben made a promise, and his mum made a promise, and everyone has left. So I think it's really fascinating that trust is such a key theme in this. I don't think either of them were wrong to trust the people they trusted, because I think trust is something that is so easily broken and really difficult to mend. But it's nice to see that actually, even though they impact each other so much, they still, like, Viola's trusted him. She's literally just watched him, or she's like heard him betray her. Like when she's being tortured and he gives up the name and then she finds that out, you can see that it obviously has impacted her. But then 2 chapters later, she's still like, no, I still trust you. Like she already knew that there was every chance that he had told Mayor Prentice about the sea and the fact they were at the shoreline. And she still did it. And she will continue to make that mistake because she continues to trust him. And that will help Todd realize that he can trust her. And they should. Those two should constantly trust each other, because the only reason he gave it up was because he was trying to save her. He would literally do anything, including but not limited to killing everybody to save her. And it was an adult.
Do you ship them? Do you ship them as a couple, guys?
I actually don't. I like them as they are, like as besties. I think there is a symbiosis with them that works really well. When she started like flirting and like stuff with Lee, I was like, I'm not fussed about this one way or the other. Like, this doesn't feel like a betrayal to Todd. But what I really loved was how secure he was when she rocked up with some blonde guy, and he was just like, let him down easy, I guess. Like he was just, this is a thing. Like their relationship, it feels more like a real adult relationship, in the fact that you're like, I love you. I will always love you. Nothing you can do will ever make me stop loving you. But it's not the butterflies, adrenaline style love. It's a hard bit. Makes it really believable for me, but honestly, I could take it or leave it. If they kiss, if they don't kiss, I don't care. Normally, I'm like, and kiss. Like, I'm literally like, I'm yelling at characters to kiss. With these two, I'm like, have a nap. just have a day off. Like, please. So yeah.
For me, I just want them to have a nice ending. That's all I want. Is for the two of them to still be friends and everything, and maybe live together somewhere quiet where nobody else is going to bother them. That's all I want, to be honest. I don't care if they're like romantically in love with each other, if they just love each other as friends. I don't really care. But what I will say, speaking of Lee, was that I was slightly worried that it was going to go down that Hunger Games route like Gale, where he was going to get quite possessive of her. I'm really glad it didn't go down that route, because Gale, by the end of the Hunger Games, could die. Yeah. I would have gone, yay, and thrown a party just to get him out the way, because he was so possessive and awful. I hated him by the end of the books. So I was so glad that Lee went, oh yeah, you've got a friend, you're really, really close to him. That's cool. I'll still help. You know, and he throw a fit or anything because she knows another guy. Yeah. It was so nice to see another case of non-toxic masculinity.
We love to see it.
Yeah. Especially considering, because Lee's from Haven, wasn't he? So he's seen that different way of living. Whereas if he'd been from Prentice Town, it would have ended differently. I think, just from the way. Because once again, I think it's nature versus nurture.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's a key theme of this book, isn't it? Is nature versus nurture. Like, that's a very key argument for this.
Very key theme. And I agree. I didn't actually ship them. Not that I oppose ship them, but I just was like, that's not the storyline I'm the most invested in of them all.
The main storyline I just want is, and they live.
Yeah.
That's the one I want.
That's what I'm looking for. I think the thing is, it's almost like an asexual romance. Like, it's not aromantic, but it's just like I could see them coexisting and being happy, as opposed to like investing in anything else. And I think that's probably where some of the possessive nature has been taken out, because it's not even on the table, which I love. Because there's only one other book that I've read where like there's a triangle like that hasn't been like fire and brimstone, I guess, afterwards, and that is Ruin Song, where the guy finds out that she is in fact gay and therefore not interested in him, and he's like, fair enough, and then they just go on their way, like that's it, just straight out.
To be fair, Patrick Ness is gay, so I also find it very interesting that a lot of the Patrick Ness books I've read are like not gay romantic. I think now he does it more than he used to, but I found that very interesting.
I did not know that about him though. That's exciting. That's like added an extra layer to. I feel like that's interesting.
I think his latest books he writes more queer relationships, but in his older stuff he didn't.
That's fair. The only other Patrick Ness book I've read is The Monster Calls.
Oh, but so you know that he likes to hurt you.
I went in and was like, I'm gonna cry, and that's all I knew. And literally that was all I knew. So when Becca was like, do you want to pick up this series? I was like, sure. And then the books rocked up, and I was like, excuse me, excuse me.
It's only gonna get bigger. It's only gonna get bigger.
My editions are pretty much on par.
Yeah. Also, fun fact: I read the Ask and Answer in a day.
What?
I did nothing. Teenage me, as I say, when I get a bit obsessed with the book, I'm addicted. I don't eat, I don't sleep, I read. That's it.
You are a machine.
I'm sorry, how quick do you read?
I don't actually read that quick. It's just because I don't do literally anything else until it's done.
That's impressive.
I don't have the
but also I was a teenager, so like what responsibility did I have?
That's fair. But like the only book I've ever finished in a day, other than my start, I mean, even my start to finish sprints have been a mixed bag, is A Cruel Prince, which I started in the morning and then and literally I opened my eyes and was like, I'm going to read for a bit before I get out of bed. The only thing I got out of bed for was to let the dog out. And then I got back into bed. And by the end, he was like, I'm hungry. And I was like, I have 3 pages left. And the sun had set. And I was like, where did the day go?
Admittedly, I have read a couple of books in a day, but they were literally like 330 pages at the most. And that was literally because they were so good. I didn't do anything else for the rest of the day, and I was uninterrupted. What lives are you living where you don't get interrupted every 5 minutes?
You don't sleep. I think the last book, it was like last week, I read a Sarah Simone book. I started at 11. I went to sleep at 4. I woke up at 7 a.m. and then I finished before like 11 again.
Phenomenal.
Just, you're...
And then I was like, why did I do that?
Okay, that's a mood.
Yeah. I mean, I can't do that anymore. I used to be able to go to a midnight showing at the cinema, get home about 3 o'clock in the morning, sleep until about 8, and then go to uni. Now, no, I've got to sleep until at least 11. Or I'm not functional.
I was talking to my dad about the fact that like a job that I'm looking at is like a 45-minute to an hour-long drive away. And I was like, but the very idea of that exhausts me. And he was like, I used to do that every day. He's like, it's only because of lockdown that you will find that an issue. He's like, you'll get used to it. And I was like, I'm not that person. I am not that girl. Like, I want to be home in time.
This is not what we want to hear.
I was like, I'm tired. I want to lay down.
I mean, my mum works from home now and has done since lockdown, but she has to go into the office one day a month, and it kills her because she's got to get up so early and drive all the way in, get past the 4 sets of roadworks to get into town, and then back again. And she's like, it kills me. I couldn't do it more than once a month. And I'm like, yeah, no. I take public transport once, and then I can't do it for another month because that's too much for me, and that's not even driving.
Yeah, I do flexible working, so it's 3 days in, and I get flashbacks to when I was a teaching assistant, and you're there every single day of the week. Like 8:30 is when you start, 3:30 is when you finish, when the kids start and finish, and it's like 40 kids all those hours. Like,
I was last week spent time with a 5-year-old and a 7-month-old, and we went bowling with a whole bunch of family, and then I was knackered after that. And that was only 4 hours at most.
Do you want to hear something super fun and super illegal?
Okay.
My working hours for the last term have been 52 hours a week, and I only get paid for 36 of them. And that is just me being at school. That is not even all the prep and stuff that I do at home. And when I had my meeting yesterday, they were like, that's just the nature of the job.
And that's why you're looking for a new one.
Among other reasons, Becca. Yeah. Among other reasons.
Yeah, because no.
Yeah, wild. But to be fair, like the school day, because it's a boarding school, the school day runs until 6, and then they actually do prep and stuff until like 10 o'clock. So yeah, it's a long old day. And I was like, you know what I don't want to do is that, and then an hour-long drive home. I don't want to get home at 8 o'clock at night, having left at 7 to get there for 8 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah, no. I mean, I used to have one day at uni a week where I'd get up at about 8:30, and I wouldn't get home till wouldn't get back to be picked up from the train station until about 7, and that was enough. And that was one day a week.
I do feel like it is massively hypocritical of me, though, to sit here and go, I think it's really interesting that this book looks at such dark, upsetting themes about how hard people have it because it's based on real life, and then in the same live stream be like, I'm sleepy because I've worked too hard.
But we cannot belittle problems because there are other problems. They are all problems. Capitalism is a huge problem.
Yes.
Yeah.
It is a huge problem, and it affects loads of people, and it's a big problem. So
that makes me feel valid.
I understand what you're saying, though. I understand what you're saying.
It's like, you know, when you're like, oh, I'm having a really bad day because my cereal was stale and the bus was late and and then someone comes in and goes, I was in a car accident, and you're like, my day's fine. Like, absolutely fine.
It was all good.
Like, genuinely, like, I went to work the other day and I was like, I'm really stressed. There's loads of stuff going on. Like, I'm enjoying the job, but like, it's a lot. And I said, are you all right, to my colleague? And she was like, my mortgage isn't going through and I might lose my home. And I went, I'm fine. Like, I'm good. And like, she's
you talk now.
And then we had like a real like 180 where I had a meeting that ended in absolute disaster and tears. And she came up to me and she's like, how did it go? And I went, and she went, my mortgage went through. And I went, oh, that's work. It's so funny. She's like, I feel really bad. I feel like I'm rubbing it in. I was like, I needed the good news. So, yeah.
To get us back on topic,
Yes.
I will not answer this question, but what predictions do you have for the next book?
They live. I'm hoping for they live. I mean, I'm very concerned about everything that happened right at the end there with all of the ships, well, at least the scout ship, and then the Spackle are also coming. So you've got 3 armies all against each other. All of them are gunning for Todd, some of them quite rightly so in some ways. And then you've got the people who are the scout ship, and whoever gets to them first, it could cause problems. You've then got to deal with who's going to run this planet. And in some ways, I kind of hope Todd and Viola get on an escape ship, get up to the rest of the ships and go, let's fly away and leave them to it.
I wish we could all do that with our problems.
They'll just kill themselves down there and someone will come out on top and we're just going to leave them to it and we're going to go somewhere else now.
We're going to quarantine for just like a couple of decades and then worry about it when they get back.
Yes. Just Todd can have a nice time on a ship. He'll learn loads of things. He'll be around people his own age. I'm sure, I was about to say Viola's parents will adopt him and then went, no, they won't.
For reasons.
It's been a long month, but it's like, I'm sure someone will adopt him and it'll be fine. He'll get a nice diet involved. He'll probably eat some new food. He'll learn some social skills and maybe anger management and everything will be fine.
Yeah, he's got a temper, hasn't he? Like, that boy is grumpy.
I'm just going to grab my laptop charger, but I'll be back.
No worries. I honestly don't know what I could predict for the next one. I know that they're fully in a war zone now. So it's not going to be good, whatever it is. And if we imagine that this has taken over months, like, it's crazy to think that this is, I honestly, I don't know.
Because the war could go on long enough for the rest of the ships to arrive and then they're going to land. And if Prentice is still in charge,
I guess it will depend on what Patrick Ness thinks of war and whether anyone who gets involved in that level of tyranny is worth redeeming. Because fundamentally, if those bigger ships arrive and call it a day and they're no better, then nothing has been achieved. It will absolutely depend on what kind of government system Patrick Ness thinks is appropriate.
I'm watching Olivia's face here to see if she's going to give anything away.
She never does.
Hannah knows I have the ultimate poker face.
Yeah, she is so good at this. That and side eye.
Trying doing something.
My only observation is that as of this book, Todd gives me Bella Swan vibes where like everybody's always just trying to kill him or manipulate him. Mm-hmm. And everybody else around him has more power than he does, but he's still like their attention is all on him.
He's the girl. He's that girl.
In a lot of ways, I was like, just leave him alone. He's a poor boy.
Like, he's a child.
Yeah, exactly.
He just wanted to be a man. That's all he wanted to be.
Yep.
I mean, he just wanted to be on his farm. Let's be honest here. Can they just give him a bunch of sheep?
He didn't even really want to be on the farm. He literally was just like, just let me learn to read and leave me alone. Just let me in a field somewhere, hang out.
Just teach him to read, put him in a library, and just leave him be. He can he'll be quite happy over there.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, I hope you enjoyed the third book.
Wait.
Shall I read the synopsis?
Go on then.
Right. Again, apologies. I'm dyslexic. Sometimes the words do not come out my mouth. But it says three armies march on New Prentice Town, each one intent on destroying the others. The new world is at war. Todd and Viola are caught in the middle with no chance of escape. That's going to be fun. As the battle commences, how can they hope to stop the fighting? And if war makes monsters of men, what terrible choices await? Then a third voice breaks into the battle, one bent on revenge. Oh dear God. Oh God. Another one. A third voice breaks into the battle, so that's probably 1017.
Yeah, that's got to be the spackle-led one, right?
Yeah. I'm still looking at Olivia like, come on, just give something away.
It's not going to happen.
Damn it! I was so hoping you were going to give something away, so I had.
Like, Becca, there's no point. She won't. Except what she will do is, are you coming to the next live show, Olivia? Are you able to make that?
It's going to be end of April. No, I'm in Barbados, guys.
Oh no!
No.
Yeah, if Olivia were going to be here, she would just sit there with a grin as we finally realised that we were either massively right or massively wrong. That's it. Otherwise, poker face extraordinaire.
You have me down to a T. You have me down to a T. I'm looking forward to watching that live show because do you know, like, it's so hard having a favorite series. Not that like nobody's read because I did make all my sisters read it, but like as people read your favorite series, it's just the best thing. I enjoyed this. This hour has been so fun for me.
Good. Well, I feel like this was like when we did the skullduggery one. That was like Becca and Abby were just like, "We'll wait because you're gonna love it or you're gonna hate it."
We literally sat there like weeping angeling, didn't we? Yeah. Just like, no, don't look at us. Or just turn the camera off.
We need to do a poison study one so that I can be like, it's my turn. I knew that was going to happen.
But I'm worried about this book.
I'm fully prepared. So, like, I was really naughty in the fact that I left this very to the last minute. But mainly that was because we had show week this week. And I was like, I can start it because there's nothing else I can do now, show week wise. And in like the preamble to everything else, I was like, that's literally, it's just taking up all my brain space. And I didn't want to not be able to come with thoughts. So I left it very much to the last minute. For this one, I've got 3 weeks off for Easter, baby. I'm going to be making notes.
Reading time. Also, are any of you doing the audiobook?
No.
Yes. Yeah, I do the audiobooks for them.
Do you like the noise?
I really do. Do you know what's really interesting? So we talked about the noise for the first one, and we talked about how like the words were kind of like layered, but they weren't actually layered on each other. The audiobook for this one was far more developed.
Abby!
He's here!
Hey!
Hello!
Welcome.
I'm on my phone, so apologies in advance.
No, that's fine. I love the angle.
Yeah.
I'm really enjoying that the noise in the second one actually feels like noise, and when it booms, it like actually booms. Like I like that.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Abby, now that you've joined us, how about if you quickly tell us what you thought about the book and then anything you want to quickly discuss?
Oh gosh,
Throw you at the deep end.
Sorry.
It was impressive. The fact that he managed to include so much, and I know it's a long book, but it's still a very fast read. Mm-hmm. So he includes so much in so little time. I thought that, I don't know how much, it's the spoiler sections, that's not too bad. Davy's character progression was immense. And it was a lot to process. Also seeing Todd and his actions, I obviously didn't agree with them, you're not supposed to, but it was very, very weird to essentially sympathize with the Nazi, essentially. And that was uncomfortable, which I'm sure was Ness's point.
I was going to very quickly say about that. The bit that scared me the most was when they're like numbering everybody, and then Prentice turns round and says, "They're not people. Like they're not people." I think is they're enemies of the state. That immediate dehumanization that got me quite hard. I mentioned it earlier, but it was just on what you were saying, Abby, that just tipped off in my head.
Yeah, and then seeing as well the way that Viola, my thing keeps refreshing, so I'm hoping I'm not dropping out too much.
Yeah. As long as you don't freeze like you did last time on that, absolutely.
That was beautiful. But last
yeah,
Viola.
Like last time, Olivia, Abby's face just completely froze, and it was like this absolute so done look of carrying on talking, and it wouldn't stop, and we were on the floor.
It was like this.
Yeah.
I actually thought you froze for a moment. You were very still.
Yeah.
Seeing Viola and how she reacts to what is essentially necessary in the revolution, and especially with everything that's happening right now, seeing what is necessary in a revolution and how I don't want to do that, but you kind of need to make the point, because otherwise they won't care. That was less impactful than Todd, because I knew that already. Seeing Todd's actions as essentially a Nazi, an unwilling one, but he still did everything. That was hard. But then seeing Viola's reactions to the kind of violent, necessary actions of the resistance was a good reminder at the minute of what needs to be done.
I think it's really interesting you talk about her reaction to the violence, because she spends time with Corinne. I can't remember what her mistress title was, but obviously Corinne says that the moment you start hurting other people, you've lost. For her, it's always been about healing. It should only be about healing. And as a reader, because Viola doesn't really believe that, you're not supposed to really believe it either until you see it firsthand, and you're like, someone has to stop. Someone has to put the weapon down and start being peaceful. Otherwise,
someone has to put the human lives first, but it's clear that New Prenticetown is not going to be the one to do it.
Yeah.
And that then means that the rebels can't stop.
Yeah.
Because New Prenticetown are the ones controlling everything.
Yeah. What I was going to say as well was, how do we all feel about, obviously Haven had some sexism problem as well, because men were doctors and women were healers and stuff like this, and it was they clearly had sexism problems there as well. Nowhere near as bad as Prenticetown, but still very bad. And then how it devolved into basically The Handmaid's Tale, with how
it very clearly showed the devolution of current day America.
Yeah.
With everything that has happened with current day United States, and how women's rights are being rolled back in the way that they are, it very clearly, and again, because this was written beforehand, it's very well done, but also it was very obvious for anyone who paid attention. But I do want to point out that this was written by a man in the early 2010s, the very early 2010s. And the fact that a man in the early 2010s was able to see this is something that should be noted. But I feel like it's very demonstrative of what has happened in the United States at this moment in time with their current elected president. They have very quickly reverted back to pre-1950s mentality, pre-war mentality. And it's just seeing it happen in fiction written over a decade before the fact emphasizes how dumb it is that it's happening now.
Yeah, we were talking about how Mayor Prentice is very Trump alike. Way before Trump.
Only Prentice has a brain.
Yes, Trump is lacking one of those.
Yeah.
I think Trump is lacking one of those, but I also think there's a lot of intentionality in what he says and does. In his contradictions, in his ridiculousness, I think there has to be some sense of intentionality to get this far as he has done.
Yeah, I think, unfortunately, as much as he is an idiot, he's too powerful and too intelligent an idiot, because he is surrounded by the right people, and he has surrounded himself in the right people. And yes, we are very much seeing this puppeteer moment from Elon Musk, but that wasn't the case the first time Trump got in. He's still able to manipulate mass people, and that's very, very similar to this narrative, and the fact that it's convenient to follow the guy with the gun, because then you won't get shot, and actually you are still subjugating yourself. There will still be consequences for that,
and eventually it will roll round to you as well, because they're not going to stop.
No one is safe. When someone is a tyrant, no one is safe.
It's all in the language, and it's all in the mentality you were speaking about earlier, Becca, about never actually being the bad guy, but letting somebody else be the bad guy at the same time as being the bad guy.
Yeah. I do also want to say, if I sound ridiculous in anything that I've said, in my defense, I have literally just came in, as in I came in, I took off my shoes and I came upstairs and turned this on from a pub crawl. So give me a little bit of leeway. But
To be fair, you sound more coherent than me, so you're fine.
You're doing
I'm not
great.
sure how, but I'm taking it.
You're doing great. What was your rating?
I gave it a 4-star. I'm truthfully not entirely sure why I haven't rated either book 5 stars.
Did you like this one more or less than the first one?
Chris is mocking how I say sure. I think I liked it more than the first one just because it developed further the plot that was already provided in book 1, and that was already something that I really enjoyed. What was he saying? But I do. There's just something about it that makes me not give it a 5 stars. I'm not sure what it is. I'm really not sure, because if I break this book down, everything is fantastic. And yet, I feel like, despite the fact that I'm really emotionally invested in everything, you know that spark that happens with a 5-star? That's not quite happened with either of these yet. Despite the fact that I think that this would be a fantastic book to break down in a classroom, I think that Ness is a fantastic author, and I'm slightly mad that I haven't read from him before, because there's clearly so much skill, so much knowledge, and so much awareness of the world around him beyond himself as a white man there present in the work, and yet it doesn't quite get me, and I don't know if that's just because I'm too old. I may have missed the boat, which is my fault, essentially. I'm reading a YA as a 28-year-old woman. Like, if I'm not the right audience, this is my fault here.
I've just realised we are double Todd's age.
Yeah.
Yeah, that just made me feel slightly ill, I won't lie. And then that's even worse, because... Oh, Abby, do you want me to flick it over, or...
Yeah, I'm going to try and leave from my phone.
Okay, then, right. There we go.
So my favourite thing was the pause. 2 faces. Oh, God.
This was not chaotic, and then Abby shows up.
It was coming up my phone and my laptop. That was awful.
No, you bring the chaos.
Were we civilized before?
We managed 45 minutes before we tangented.
I was going to say, is this my fault that there's a lack of civilization? Really?
You are the one who's just come back from a pub crawl.
I came back from an art exhibition. Just putting it out there.
I haven't left the house today.
And yet you were not on time, Hannah.
No, to be fair, it was a lie. It was hyperbole for the joke. I have left the house exactly once, and it was to drop Zach off to work. And I would have actually been on time because I dropped Zach off much earlier than he was supposed to be at his shift. But then my dad called me and had to give me life advice, and I felt like I couldn't rush him in that. So
hurry up and get to the advice bit.
Yeah. What was really funny is I said, Zach's in the car with me, just so you know. And my dad clearly didn't hear me, because then he was like, yeah, Zach just needs to peel up his big girl pants and get on with stuff. And I was like,
No.
Thanks, Dad. Yeah. And I texted Zach afterwards, I was like, I'm so sorry. And he was like, no. He's like, I know what your dad means. And he means well. And I was like, that's a relief, because I'd have been pissed. If his mum had said something like that on the speakerphone about me, I would have had words. So.
Bless him. God.
Shall we move it back into book plans? But I don't know quite else what to say, to be honest. I was going through my list of questions. I think we've covered them. Abby, that's what I was going to say. Everyone, actually. What do we think of the ask and the answer, and how we feel about both of these groups with the fact they are called the ask and the answer, and I don't know what I'm trying to get at here. I won't lie.
The answer is, I've also noticed how I say that differently to you. North-South divide, wonderful. The answer is obviously intended to be, and obviously you all know my political views, all three of you very strongly, the side I agree with. And so, of course, that's the side you're supposed to agree with as well. And I think that their naming is quite clever at the time with no counterpart to base off of. Calling it the Ask for Mayor Prentice, his version of things, I feel like is a clever wordplay, but that's what he's good at, is manipulating language. And it's clever wordplay, but that doesn't mean that it's good. And I personally feel like Ness has done well in kind of towing the line of it's clever wordplay, but come on, you know what he's doing, and yet people are still following it. And whilst that may have seemed unrealistic to young readers in the early 10s reading this, as older readers and simultaneously as readers currently living through 2025, because I'm sure the younger readers are currently picking up on what's happening, it does feel very accurate of like, it's just about clever enough, but also, are you actually going for this?
What I was going to say, it popped into my head and then popped straight back out again, so that's great. What? I'm just going to refresh my brain. Because, oh Jesus, what the hell was I about to ask? I don't know. Someone else ask a question while I think.
Okay, so looking at it as like two factions, I think it's really interesting because before they name themselves the Ask, they refer to any kind of interrogation, torture as the asking, or filling. They talk about like their noise being full of question marks or questionings or askings, and it's like the idea that that's the dangerous thing. The idea to ask questions is dangerous. Obviously, very much hints at the idea of knowledge is power, and if someone is seeking power, seeking knowledge is the best way to do that, but also they're going to control knowledge. So I think that's really fascinating because all of that is sewn up at the end when they're given their Ask badge, as opposed to at the start where we're introduced to the Answer as a militia. And a rebellious militia that, is very much on the side of freedom, but has its own issues with how it deals with that and who it trusts and how it works. Obviously works as a faction, very much disrupts the day-to-day life of everyone in Prentice Town, or New Prentice Town even. But I think Ness feels like the kind of guy, from having read the first two, feels like the kind of guy where he plans everything and then he'll get an idea and he'll go back and thread more stuff in to embed it beforehand. It's not a case of, they started referring to the interrogations as askings, right? So to kind of subtly hint that you're going to be interrogated, but without threat, because that's the mayor's whole shtick. I'm not here to hurt you. I swear I'll never hurt you. I'll just instruct people to hurt you on my behalf. Versus the Answer, which is the retribution against that, or the rebellion against that. To introduce the Answer first and then have all these hints at what the Ask is going to be is very clever and very well thought out. And I like a writer who clearly does their work. I think it's fascinating that the book is called The Ask and the Answer, because that feels like they decided to call it that because the commissioning editor or whoever it was that decided that that's what it would be called when they took it on in the first place was like, that's my favorite dynamic of this whole thing, is that it's torture versus rebellion, but they're called Ask and Answer.
It's interesting because I saw this when I was like in secondary school, so when I was like 11 onwards. I saw this series on display in the library the whole time, and I thought the cover of the Ask and the Answer, which is not the cover you have, Becca, it's a different one, was the ugliest thing in existence. It was that one, but like white background instead of black. Okay. And I was just like, that's so ugly. And I saw the title, The Ask and the Answer, and I was like, that's so ugly and unappealing. I'm never going to read that series, which I obviously did later. But I just find it very interesting because I feel like the concept of The Ask and the Answer is so much more appealing to adult readers than it is to teens, which is when I read it. And I think all of it, like Monsters of Men, The Knife of Never Letting Go, they're all quite metaphorical, which is just so much harder for teenagers to feel drawn to, like they do a illustrated beautiful person on the cover, which is not what this book is about. But even a symbol like the Hunger Games would be easier to process.
I am surprised that they've never deviated dramatically from the original cover intentions. With how much cover styles have changed over the years. Like, loads of books have gotten dramatically different cover iterations that are intended for the YA audience. And with something that is so impactful and so relevant continuously, which is sad that it is, but it is, it's surprising that although there have been cover iterations, none of them have been that dramatically different from each other. There have been differences. There's the white version and the black version. Okay, that's a difference. And then there's the version that Becca has, which is another version altogether. But that's not all that different from the white version with the blue A. And it is surprising that they've not put the time in to do that. And I wonder, because it sells well. Dystopian, during dystopian times, sells well.
And it has a film.
Yes, with a well-known actor, Tom Holland, like a well-beloved actor in it. So I'm surprised that they didn't monopolize more on that.
They did redo the book cover for the first one, but I think maybe because the film did so badly, they just stopped printing it with that one.
They were like, no.
Yeah, put it this way, I'm a massive Tom Holland fan, still haven't seen the movie. Because
I haven't seen it as much as I love these books. Even when they announced it, I was like, the noise, I know you can do it through an audiobook, but the noise is just so hard to communicate on screen. And it felt a bit like, I really didn't like, I didn't really like the film Bird Box. I don't think it communicated any of the horror that the book has, because there are just some things that are not meant to be visual. It's very much the Jaws effect of as soon as you see it, it takes something away. I have to go, I'm afraid, but sorry, I just realized the time.
Yeah, it's 10 to 8. We get it.
Yeah, get it.
See you later.
Have a lovely evening.
Thank you. I hope you enjoy continuing the discussion. I'm looking forward to listening to the rest of the chat.
Okay. See you later. Bye. But what I was going to say quickly, it's just come into my brain, was that the answers actions kind of was like maybe a little bit suffragette-y in the way that they are fighting against a patriarchal oppressive thing that is oppressing women more and more and more and more and more, and they're trying to fight against that very, very loudly and very, very publicly. I don't know if you two agree with that. It just kind of popped into my head as a kind of weird thought in the middle of it.
Almost, but I feel like the suffragettes, whilst they were potentially loud for the time period, looking back at them now, they weren't. Looking back at kind of the norms of the present day, and obviously this is intended for YA, so the symbolism has to be a little more obvious. And the norms of present day and what they did back in the day, the only really dramatic thing that they did was the horse racing one, where someone jumped in front of a horse. And even that, I feel like, especially with how much exposure people of all ages have had to the horrors that are happening like in war zones actively now, I feel like someone jumping in front of a horse is dramatic and will get attention, but is not as dramatic today. Even in 2008, I don't feel like it was as dramatic.
It was just a thought that popped into my brain, to be honest. It was just
I think it's a comparison. I don't think it's a one-for-one comparison. I think it's interesting because both of them are guerrilla warfare tactics. You know, one of my favorite things that the suffragettes did was line up along, I think it was Bond Street, and each with one hammer and one hit take out every window along that street, because the fine would work out to something like 2 shillings each, because they only struck it once, as opposed to like someone going in and doing all the windows. So it was like a shared protest. And I think this is interesting because the mentality amongst the answer is shared responsibility for everyone's freedom. However, it is probably more akin to Hamas in the way that it kind of takes weaponry and reuses it in very tactical, violent ways.
But
And
even compared to Hamas, even then, the answer goes much further than I've seen any left-wing militia go.
Mhm.
I've seen it happen, I may be uninformed, but I've seen it happen with other things, but I've never seen a left-wing militia where its intent is to stop violence, for example, Hamas, use double bombs.
Mhm.
For anyone who is watching this without reading it, why? But bombing somewhere and then having a second delayed bomb happen again soon after, so that those who are rescuing people are then damaged. That has happened to the Palestinian people, but Hamas has not used it themselves because that's not something I could ever see them doing. Yeah, and I've never seen that written and or actioned by a left-wing group before. And that was something that I feel like really hammered home Viola's unwillingness to join in. And I understand why she did. I understand why she changed her mind. Like, it all makes sense. It all makes total sense. But it really hammers home Viola's like hesitance, because what do you mean you purposely set up to hurt people who were trying to help?
Yeah.
Like, that was an interesting aspect to give to the answer, because it removes the reader from them slightly. Most people who write essentially a left-wing militia, a left-wing protest, they want to make sure that you unequivocally side with them. They want to make sure that you side with them no matter what, so that you, especially in YA, it's a bit different for adult, but especially in anything middle grade in YA, you side with the left wing that is intending to promote, human rights and equality. But then with this one, the answer is doing those double bombs. And that is something that a lot of people will never side with, understandably so. And it's very interesting that Ness chose to show such a violent and almost, I say almost, no, it is a cruel tactic of war that is primarily used by those who are usually right-wing because they care less for human life, and to show it used by a left-wing group. I feel like that was a very strong message that I was surprised by.
Yeah, I think it's really there as well to make the reader think as well and be like, both of these leaders are doing terrible things, and I am wondering if Coil, to make the Hunger Games comparison again, because Abby, for context, both the this trilogy and the Hunger Games trilogy, each one came out in the exact same year, and this one's got a lot of parallels, like Coil and Coin and things like this. There's a lot of parallels between the two, and I am wondering if Coil, if she gets out on top, if she's going to devolve into maybe a Coin type character, who is then maybe going to turn this against the men in retribution.
With a slight spoiler for the Hunger Games, so meet me until my hands are down if you care, similar to the double bombs that were done that ended up killing Prim. But then interesting that they were published at very similar times. If anything, if they were published at the same time, then Ask and the Answer would have been published prior to the final Hunger Games.
It was the year before.
Yeah.
So then I imagine that it doesn't mean that they're copying, but it proves that Ness was not copying Hunger Games, which is the bigger theory.
We were talking about that earlier, about the fact that in theory they would have been written around the same time, because to be published a year later, one is being workshopped whilst one is being written, but they both would have been finished before their release dates, like by at least a year. So it makes sense that they would have similarities, but it was very much a case of like two ideas in a vacuum that have come out.
I also find it fascinating that both of these books were written and published in a time where I believe both authors are American.
Yeah, they are.
And in a time where America had its first ever Black president. And it was the most left-leaning it has been for a while with that Black president, because, of course, that comes hand in hand. And I find it fascinating that both were written shortly before that change, where obviously society was moving towards it, and then published at that point in time. And just the fact that it happened when the US, which is their own nationality, so it makes sense that they are prominent here, that they were as left-wing as they have been for in our 3 lifetimes, the most left-wing they have been. Not necessarily in the US's entire history, but in our lifetimes, the most left-wing they have been. And that is when these dystopian books about events that essentially came to pass almost, Hunger Games less, but Knife of Never Letting Go. Ugh. And it's interesting that that was written in such a positive time frame.
And it's interesting that Suzanne Collins has come back to do Sunrise on the Reaping, and Patrick Ness is publishing a new book in this series next year. And it makes
dystopians are back, baby. They never really died, but they are back.
Yeah.
Like there's loads coming out.
But it's interesting that they had such a rise in such a, again, these are primarily written by Americans, primarily published by the American publishers, so it's separate to anything that's happening elsewhere. But it's interesting that they had such a rise in the US when there was such a left-wing leaning that is against everything in these books, and that they're coming back again when the US is the furthest right we have ever seen it.
It does
realistically in its entire 300-year history, if we're being generous, it is the most right-wing we have ever seen in the States.
It does make me wonder what he's going to do in this new series, and how more he's going to not knock us over the head with it, but more like what he's going to do in that one to really drive home the point.
Yeah,
because
it makes sense that both of them have come back to kind of be like, hello, I wrote something about this. Do you want to look at it, please?
Without giving spoilers for Sunrise on the Reaping, because I read this book and then that one immediately afterwards. It was one hell of a week. But Sunrise on the Reaping, without giving away spoilers, really beats you over the head with propaganda and how that changes a story and things like this. It does it very, very well. It's not quite beating you over the head with it, but it is very much part of that story. And I am wondering what Patrick Ness is going to do in this new one. And if it's going to be based in this world, if it's going to be based wherever, if it's still going to be Todd and Viola, or if it's going to be somebody else, or what.
Now I'm wondering what the trilogy would have been like if Ness had written it now. Because
I don't think it could have gotten darker.
But it could have been more obvious.
Yeah.
Like, I noticed in the first book the links between the indigenous peoples of North America and the Europeans. And then you said yourself, Becca, that you noticed it much more clearly in the second book.
Yeah.
And I feel like if he'd written it now, it likely would have been screaming at you in the first book, because it's so hard to write something with more nuance and more subtlety when the world is burning.
Yeah. I mean, Olivia has just said, she's watching from the comments, by the way, so hi Olivia. She's just said that she's glad it wasn't too obvious in this, because I think I'm actually agreeing with her on this one, because I think if he'd been more obvious, I think it would have done the book a bit of a disservice, because I think maybe it would have made you feel like he was talking down to the reader if it'd been more obvious with it, whereas the way he's done it, it makes you as a reader make those connections and makes you think.
Yeah, that's definitely
things.
That's definitely a really important part of the book, especially again with it being YA. It's a really important part of the book that you have to make the connections yourself. I do just wonder if, because of the lack of I'm just spitballing essentially, but it's just the lack of reading comprehension that at least online the present day American youth has shown. And of course that doesn't mean that that's the case, but at least on the internet, the present day American youth vocal minority has shown a lack of reading comprehension when they've been present online, and that is of course going to influence writing. And I do wonder what potential dystopian books we might have come out of that, where
and how many of them are going to get banned.
The ability to draw the conclusions yourself is going to be much tougher for them to feel comfortable in themselves as clearly trying to promote something, which I agree with. It's going to be much less comfortable for them to put out there because it's not clear. And again, this is potentially a vocal minority. I'm not in the US education system, but this vocal minority is showing that they have no media literacy. And I wonder, like, it's all well and good Patrick Ness releasing this new book in this series and bringing attention back to the series, but are the American youth, which is what this new book is going to be aimed at, going to be able to comprehend truly what he's showing? Will they have the education about the colonization of the United States, about the Holocaust, about everything else? Will they have been given that education to be able to draw the dots that they need?
Well, not only that, are they interested? Because let's be honest, the ones that need to learn that lesson aren't reading the book.
Yeah, because, and also the ones who also need to be reading the book are probably in the States and in the places where the biggest book banning is happening. And let's be honest here, these books, I'm surprised I haven't heard about them being banned yet. I'm pretty sure they have been, but not to jinx it. Touch wood, I've got this on a wooden thing, so touch wood, the bed. But I don't know, it's just the people who need to read this, especially now, I don't think are going to be. If they are, I don't know if they're going to have the media literacy. I mean, I know, like, I've met a lot of people and talked to a lot of people as well, and they, like, even our age, where their media literacy is not the greatest. And I mean, Olivia's just asked me to recommend this book for school curriculums.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of my in-person friends are older than me, just with the way that my life has worked out. And they definitely have the media literacy. But then when I do speak to people who are my age or younger, obviously this is not across the board, but there is a higher rate compared to my older friends who are older than me by a decade or more. There is more of a difference in the media literacy. And that's fascinating in and of itself, because obviously I know that, of course, us three have decided that we love books and that we want to actively consume them. But I do feel like that I had, of course, my media literacy has increased. Of course it has. I've aged, I've read more, I've learned more, etc. But I do feel like my media literacy at the point in time that I would have been reading this would have been enough to at least grasp the point. To be slightly insulting to younger Abby, she would have at least got the fucking point of this book. And there are people my age and younger, because I think I'm the youngest of us three. And there are people my age and younger, and they can't even get after reading 3 of these books. I know we haven't read the 3rd one yet, but after reading 3 of these books, they still wouldn't grasp the fucking point. And I don't understand how that's happened, because of course I've had, at least for the ones my age, I've had the same education as you. How are you not getting? How can you not see this? Even if you personally are, to put some personal preference in here, a right-wing knobhead.
You're not allowed to be political here, Abby.
But they should still, even if they have different political views to myself, they should still read the book and see the intended view. They should still read the book, and even if they disagree with it for some fucking idiotic reason, they should still be able to see that. But so many of them can't even see that they would agree and or disagree with literature like this, and it's concerning.
What would worry me is people reading this book and then agreeing with Prentice.
I doubt that would happen for the vast majority of people.
There's some certain followers of Orange people. I
said people?
Yeah.
Not idiots.
Wait, and the Olympus Uprising? Is that what's happening?
The Olympus uprose on January the 6th. They already tried.
Yeah. And then they all got let off.
After murdering people, yes.
And raping people.
Yes.
And everything else.
And everything else.
Can anyone watching tell our political views?
I am glad we're all on the same page, because I sometimes forget that I am surrounded by conservatives all the time. And then I'll say something and I'll be like, oh, we don't agree on this? Oh, whoopsie.
Yeah, I live in a village that is very not of my leanings, put it that way.
The only person that I'm around that is more right-wing was my dad. Ex-army, joined at 16, has voted Tory his entire life. He voted Green in the last election.
Good for him.
Without listening to me, so I don't think he even counts anymore.
Yeah.
We've been talking about Palestine, and he's like, the Israelis are wrong. I'm like, yes, Kevin, yes.
Well done, Kevin.
We are proud of you. Look, man, he was brainwashed by the British military from 16 years old. We are proud of him for recognizing.
It's easily done. As proven by this book, brainwashing,
Indeed.
easily done.
Especially from youth.
Oh, speaking of brainwashing and the book, let's go back to the book for a sec. I'm pulling in Olivia, bringing us back on task. I love the fact that the plot twist was that the mayor and his men had just never taken the cure. That relying on a drug, because that was so in character for him, and yet such a fun twist that it was like, oh, we don't need it. We're just better than you.
Yeah. And
yeah, I did not see that coming, to be fair.
Loved it.
It's something that adds an extra dynamic to the patriarchy that's present, because these men that are so awful and so horrendous towards women have managed to control these thoughts that broadcast, and so they are then closer to the women that they are, like, what's the word, imprisoning? Let's go with that one.
They're adapting to be predators of their prey.
They are closer to what they are oppressing than they were before, and they see that as an improvement while still oppressing those. And of course, there will have been sexism in this society. It's based off of Earth prior to landing on this planet, but they are still continuing it, and it's fascinating that becoming closer to the oppressed has made them stronger, not weaker.
But they're not going to see that because they don't view women, let's be honest, as people.
Nope.
No.
Women are not people in their minds. They are, like, in my mind, they see women as one step up from the spackle. Like Davey said at one point, they're there to be whores, and if not, you kill them. Like you said,
as someone who works in tech as a female, I've got a lot of experience of being treated essentially like a child. And these sorts of men treat children with a distinct lack of autonomy as well. These misogynistic men, they treat children of any gender, but primarily females, with a complete lack of autonomy. You don't have any self-choice. You do what we say because you are a child. And as a woman in tech, I have been treated like a child by these men.
Yeah.
Recently.
To be fair, I've spent the last day arguing with people on TikTok because I dared to make a video yesterday saying that out of the cast of Avengers Doomsday, there was 27 announced on Wednesday. It was a wonderful day. That live stream just it brought me so much joy. There was only 5 women, and I was pointing out that in the next round of announcements, I hope there are more women. And that apparently basically set them all off. And I literally had someone arguing with me all day saying that there's nothing wrong with that. And that if it was a whole team of men and one woman, there's nothing wrong with that. What's the problem with it? And I was like, I am not leading you through sexism. And
I feel like I would have gotten really silly with my responses and been like, you know what, actually, that's a really good point, because it means the boys can finally kiss.
Oh, I should have done that. I so should have done that. Oh my God.
You know what? I think it's so much better when it's just the boys kissing.
To be fair, there was another one where they were going like, oh yeah, there was a whole load of women in these ones. And I was like, oh yeah, okay, then that means we need to give the men a chance in case we forget about them. They haven't replied since. I was just like...
I still, like, it is one of my biggest bugbears is that one Endgame Marvel scene where it's like, and all the women stand together. And it's like, why? Like, why? Like, just have, like, everyone else had, like, a little dynamic moment that showed off their superpower. Like, all the boys had their little moment, individual.
To be fair, that moment is very much a reference to the A-Force, who's the all-female Marvel team, right? Which is basic, and it's in reference to the comics, exactly like that moment where they're all standing in a circle in the first one and the camera goes round. You know, there's no point in it. It's just a moment, you know, and I love the A-Force moment. Literally, some of my pops on my shelf are in the all-female moment because it's my little A-Force shelf because I love that moment. But, yeah, they do need to do better.
I don't mean to poop on that moment. Yeah. When did the A-Force come out?
2016, admittedly.
Jesus.
So to think that in all that time they've learned.
It was 2012. But yeah, there has been a few other all-female team-up bits, and that comic didn't last long, to be fair, because it was part of a big crossover. They do need to do better.
But that's what I'm saying is I think it's one of those things where if you're an avid fan and you can be like, oh, it's in reference to this, and it's like the fact that that's a really limiting reference is not ideal.
No,
If it happened when I, again, as the youngest of us three, was alive, it's a fail.
Yeah, no, they've really got to do better on that one. And I'm hoping they're going to do more in the future, but who knows? Most men are the ones writing the comics. There's a few women. I tried to shout them out.
Yeah. But with the book as well, with the willingness of, not all of, because some of them don't have any interaction. Like, for example, Todd has no real interaction with any of the women in New Prenticetown anyway, because he came here and only knew Viola. He doesn't know anyone here. He has no interaction with them. Davy, again, is new to town and has no interaction with them. And the previous mayor is shut up in a tower. So the three main male characters, and obviously Mayor Prentice, but he's a knob, but the three main male characters that we see don't really have the option to interact with the women in New Prenticetown that are remaining. But we are told about the remaining men that they are quite willing, they're not like happy to do it, but they're not going to fight against the women being locked up as they were, the women having to go out in groups, which is what has happened 10 years since in the Middle East with certain oppressed regions, for example, Afghanistan specifically, with the women only being allowed to go out in certain hours of the day. And the men are just like, oh, well, that's fine.
Yeah,
because it doesn't matter to me.
Yeah, they're only allowed to see their own wives and children for like an hour a week or something. They're like, yeah, this is fine. Yeah. And they stand there.
This is normal.
Yeah, they stand there and watch Prentice do that and go, yeah, this is fine. Whereas the women are going, what the hell?
Well, do you know what it's like? And it's a testament to the lack of empathy, because the only way Todd is able to get through them is like, who do you think they'll put bans on next? And it's not until their own autonomy is threatened that they stand up.
Yeah.
And it's so
really hungry.
It's so representative of modern society, modern being the past 40, 50 years.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
to quote the meme, I never thought that leopards would eat my face when we elected the leopard eating face party.
Like, as someone who is undiagnosed but very clearly neurodivergent, I don't comprehend how it's primarily neurotypicals. Primarily. It isn't all, but what I see online is mainly neurotypical people are just like so.
Maybe they're the neurodivergent ones. Did we ever think of that? Did you ever think that maybe they're the ones with the problem? Because there's something going on.
I'm not diagnosed, so technically I'm neurotypical, so they can't get offended, because technically, as of a doctor's recommendation, I'm in your group, so shut up. But like
one of us.
That could have gone two very different ways. I'm glad it went to the like one of us vibe, as opposed to like, you know, when someone's like, I'm actually a quarter Irish, and you're like, no, that's you need to no. No, that's not how
like the fact that they are so, again, this is generalizing, this is talking about a whole group, in case you couldn't guess. But the fact that the vocal minority, potentially majority, but the vocal group is so willing to be like, oh, but it only matters to me. Like, there are so many white women in America, for example, that are just now starting to care. Now, I'm sorry, I, as a white British woman, have cared about the plights of your Indigenous and Black people for longer than you have, and you live in that goddamn fucking country. Why have I cared for longer than you? I live across the Atlantic.
Because they didn't know any better, because it was convenient not to.
Literally, I am sat here, all three of us are sat here as Brits, as British people, and we have learned from the internet. I know you two have learned pretty much the same as me, and us three have learned more about the Indigenous and Black and other people of color, the Japanese, for example, with the internment camps. We have learned and have taken on more about people of color in the United States and the treatment that they have had than white people living in that system who have benefited from the racism.
how much of that is them also being socialized that way, and how much of it is a societal way.
But
that
we
now
have
it's
learned
being
it.
smacked in their faces.
Like, we have learned it from the internet. I didn't learn this
Yeah.
from fucking school. No one in school taught me anything about the States. I learned everything about the States from the fact that it's so predominantly online and you can't escape it even if you want to. I learned everything about minorities in the United States from the internet. Everything. And again, my internet is British. I am British. Everything knows I'm British and it knows where I'm based. The internet knows everything fucking about me. And despite that, I was still able to see content that taught me about the non-majority people in the they're actually numbers-wise the majority, but the non-majority people, the non-empowered people in the United States, and us three, as people who aren't even living in that country, have been able to easily, without any effort, access that information. And yet there are white Americans, white American women that are just now waking up because suddenly their rights are threatened. And where the fuck was that for the past 50 years?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, our only hope is that they now get to go full Karen and actually change things.
I mean, I went a bit positive Karen there, so sorry about that.
But if they use their Karen powers for good,
then they become Jennifers.
exactly. Become the Jennifers of the world. That should be a phrase. Don't be a Karen, be a Jennifer. But
I'm replying to Chris about dinner. Literally, I came in. I didn't even speak to Chris. I came in, I took my shoes off, and I came upstairs. So I'm just like, hello, I love you. What are we eating?
see, my
And then
mum
I
went out
did.
all day. And she came back at about 10 to 6 and was just like, hi, through the door. And I was like, yeah, hi. And then she brought me biscuits.
That's nice.
I know. She got some biscuits off my aunt. So she was just like, do you want some? And I was like, yes, please. I'll have those snacks.
Fair.
I was trying to think, was there any other bit of discussion I wanted to talk about? That's it. Abby, what do you think's going to happen in the next one?
Oh, Jesus. I am hoping, because of the time it was written in, that we will have a Hunger Games ending, which is, because it's the best I can hope for, which is awful and horrendous, and we will see horrors, and we will cry, and we will be upset about events.
We will see horrors.
But that in the end, it turns out to be at least minorly positive. That's what I'm hoping for. And I feel like because of the time it's written in, that's more likely. If it was a book that had been published in the past few years, I would have expected that we're going to get a horrific ending. It's going to be horrendous. New Prentice Town is going to prevail. But I feel like at the time, again, with the political environment that was present in the US at the time, it was supposed to be more of a warning rather than a klaxon. And so I'm hoping that because of that, we will end up with something that I'm sure something awful will happen. I do hope that both Todd and Viola survive, but I wouldn't be surprised. Huh?
What about Lee?
I wouldn't be surprised if he went.
Yeah, to be fair.
I hope he doesn't. He seems nice, but I wouldn't be surprised.
He seems nice. I don't know why that tickled me so much. But it really,
It's like a nice boy.
he seems nice.
Seems all right. He can
seems
live
like a
if he
nice
wants. But yeah, just with the fact that I didn't know before coming on here that they were published at the same time period, I do feel like that does influence my response. And I do think that there will be some huge negatives. People are going to die, shit's going to go down, and that they're going to have some form of starting to rebuild just before the end. And I don't think we're going to see them having kids because Todd and Viola are much too young for that. Katniss and Peter are much older. But I could see them starting a new town or something like that. So I think we're going to see some horrors. Huh?
Do you ship them?
Not necessarily as a romantic couple. I imagine, again, because of the time period this was written, that tended to be the type that you would see in this book. I expect them to be together as people, but that doesn't necessarily mean that I expect them with a 2025 reader's viewpoint to be a couple. But knowing, again, when this third book would have been written, that is more likely to be the case. But I'm not hoping for it. I just can see that it could happen. But it also could quite easily, with the way he's written it, not happen. And Viola could end up with Lee, and Todd could, I don't know, do his own thing. There might be someone in book 3. But yeah, I expect horrors. I expect death. I expect the Spackle to be treated even worse than they were. Obviously, we have them starting this fight, and I'm curious to see where that goes. As someone who is pro-Indigenous rights, I hope they fuck over the entirety of New Prentisstown.
That's what I said.
But
I hope that everyone gets on a ship and flies away, and the Spackle get their planet back.
that would be a fantastic ending. Is everyone ends up on that ship that Viola's people are coming on? Obviously not her mum and dad, but, you know, Viola's society is coming on, and they all get on. Everyone's had the fight between the humans. They've killed all of the New Prentice, or converted all of the New Prentisstown people, or Prentisstown, and they get on the ship and they bugger off somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, is there any kind of way of stopping then that level of sexism going through the rest of the ship and starting the cycle
Yes.
again?
'Tis only Viola and Todd that survive. And like Noah's Ark, they take some animals with them because he knows how to raise them and she's got that medicine down pat. And they live in peace forever and they teach their ancestral children to chill the fuck out.
Or everyone who has the noise, this would make me sad, don't get me wrong, okay? However, everyone who has the noise dies.
What about
No
Todd?
men. No men. Todd still committed war crimes that would have had him convicted and hung under the Nuremberg trials.
Yeah, he did.
Good
Yeah.
point. But
Like, I understand Todd's actions. I empathize with Todd's actions. Todd is still getting imprisoned for his crimes.
yes.
He's also a child, which gives him some more leeway. But he is still, like, what he did to the Spackle, I understand why he did it, but it's the same argument as people had at the Nuremberg trials. I did it because I was ordered to. And that is no argument when it comes to a Holocaust.
Yes. So would you prefer Todd is imprisoned and is punished for his crimes, and then eventually, when he is atoned for them, he's then allowed to have a reasonable...
It's difficult because obviously we've grown to like Todd as a character, but with his actions in the Ask and the Answer, like, I do like Todd as a character. I understand all of his actions. I understand everything that he does, and I could easily see myself doing the same thing, which makes me sad about myself. But at the same time, he has committed war crimes and has helped to commit a genocide. And whilst I would like Todd to be redeemed, I wouldn't be mad if Todd was killed or imprisoned permanently, because I can see Patrick Ness not doing that. Again, it's YA.
Do you know what? It's people like you that are why Disney can only ever kill their characters off and not actually redeem them. I think he will get redeemed. I think there's got to be some redemption in it.
Okay,
even the worst people have to be.
To give me some leeway, how many Nazis do you think have been redeemed?
I think it's really hard when you're making a one-for-one comparison with...
But it is so
No.
clear.
Let me finish. When you're making a one-for-one comparison to a general group like Nazis to an individual situation, yes, his behavior is very Nazi-specific, centric, and metaphorical. However, you can't say the same of any Nigerian child forced to carry a gun into the bush and shoot people, and yet their behavior is the same. Their situation is different. You wouldn't be able to say, for example, that none of them deserve redemption. You could argue to a certain degree and to a certain level of success that one of the many issues we have with Nazis is that they should know better, that they are of a level of intelligence and maturity and still choosing fascism, whereas Todd is a child.
But unfortunately, this is a YA book where the children are supposed to, because it's written for children who believe they have complete autonomy and comprehension, he is then supposed to have this comprehension because he is a YA character. For him to be redeemed in the way that you're saying, I would need him to do a Schindler's List.
Okay, but that doesn't mean that he can't be redeemed. And if anything, you've proven my point, though, is the fact
Man
that
needs to free every single speckle he sees and actively act against Mayor Prentice for me to forgive him. Because he's a child, but he also knows what he's doing. And he's like, he's not a child, he's a teenager. There is a mild difference there. And I need him to take action against what he's doing. Dramatic action, personally. I am very strongly left-wing. You two both know this.
No. Like, I don't think your political leanings really have... I think it's interesting because I think you're making an active disparity between one group of oppressors and another group of oppressors, which I'm trying to illustrate is by age. And for you, the age is irrelevant because the age of the audience is the same. He is still a child. He is still learning those mistakes. He is not educated. He is illiterate. He has been abandoned by everybody. He has been kept in the dark. He is the perfect person to be radicalized. And yet his actions have shown throughout that whilst he has been passive about it, it has been something that has weighed on him. There is already a level of guilt and remorse there, a level of empathy there that we do not associate generally with Nazis or fascists. There is an element there, much like with Davy, who learnt towards the end that he didn't want to do that. He didn't want to shoot Todd. He didn't want to be violent. His dad used it as a weapon to beat him with, that he was weak. And actually, no, he just wasn't the aggressor and the kind of totalitarian oppressor that his father was. I think we can add context to it from today and make him more of a villain. But I think equally we can add context and make him more of a kind of like anti-hero.
I do struggle with not judging fictional and or real people against how I would judge myself. If I was in Todd's position, and obviously I know 16-year-old me. I don't know how old Todd is. How old's Todd?
14.
14. For me, that was similar. Obviously, it's different for everyone, but for me, that was similar. I know 14-year-old me. And so I would judge 14-year-old me that way. And I do struggle to separate it.
I think I know that 14-year-old you in your experiences. I don't think anyone could realistically go, and if I was in that situation, I would do blah, 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 blah.
Because no. I would still judge myself the same. I'm not saying I would have acted differently. I'm saying that I would judge myself the same way as I'm judging Todd. I'm not saying I would have done better than Todd. I'm not saying that I would have been a better person and that 14-year-old me would have known the right choices and known what to do. Realistically, 14-year-old me would have done the same as Todd. Realistically. Like self-preservation.
Another way, because this is the thing, it's like we don't know how we are going to react. And I think what I really like is the fact that Todd and Viola go through the same thing and they react very differently. One of them, it's headbutt first, think later, and one of them is very considered and kind of...
And that also is very different based on how they're treated because of their gender.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's very different. Like, if Todd had been treated the same way as Viola and vice versa, I could easily see them swapping. I could easily see Todd in The Answer and Viola having to go along with things if they'd been treated in the reverse way.
Yeah.
But because Viola was immediately repressed just because she was born with a vagina, then she immediately was on the offensive because she had done nothing. Whereas whereas Todd was then just told how to do things, and they were not good things. So... But that's something that's a personal failing where I struggle. Like, I would judge myself that harshly. And when it's like a fictional character or someone that you're allowed to kind of separate, I wouldn't do it with someone closer or someone personal or someone like on an individual level. But if it's like a celebrity or a well-known person or myself, you're a Nazi, what the fuck are you doing? Anyone else I would give like more leeway to, but especially like main characters in fiction, I'm like, well, I'm going to judge you, this fictional character, the exact way I would judge myself knowing who I was at that age, and yes, I would hate myself, and I would think myself a Nazi, and I would think the Nuremberg trial should do what they should do with me, and that's why I judge Todd that way. Now, that may be a personal issue, but that may explain why.
I just think it's fascinating. I think because, you know, we don't read anything in a vacuum. Everything happens with context for us. And I think it's really interesting that you're like, I'm judging him on basis on this, but actually that same lens, because like, yeah, if it were, if this was less of a metaphor about fascism, in like that Nazi white supremacy context, and more of a guerrilla warfare, drug smuggling, like Africanized antagonist style, would we have the same response?
No.
Exactly. So I think that's
also,
really interesting.
Also, if this was a non-fiction,
yeah, for sure.
If this was a non-fiction, I would have a lot more forgiveness for Todd. And I find it fascinating about myself. So there you go. Take anyone who's still watching, take my views with a pinch of salt because of that. But yeah, if this was a non-fiction about something that had actually happened, and this was all true, and obviously it would be awful. It is all true. Hint, hint, cough, cough. But if Todd was real, I would have a lot more forgiveness for him. But as a fictional character, I judge him as harshly as I judge myself. And I hate myself. So that's why I'm judging Todd so harshly. And I'm judging Viola with the same lens. But Viola is, luckily for her, on the right side of things here. She is apprehensive about the excessive violence that the answer is using, but understands the need for it in the end. Once she's shown more information about it, she prioritizes like she's doing everything quote unquote correct. And so she's
more political leanings.
I did say quote. I did quote it. Correct. And so that's why I'm not judging her as harshly, whereas Todd is doing everything quote unquote wrong. And it's like, yeah, if they were real people, I would have a lot more leniency, but they are not. And so I'm like, yeah, Todd's fucked up.
This guy done goofed.
Real people, I'm like, oh, bless you. Like, you went through so much. Fictional people, I'm like, I hate you as much as I hate myself.
Do better.
On a slightly different note, did either of you have the short story in your version of the book?
No, I need to read it at some point.
The short story is very interesting because it's set in one of the fishing towns.
I did read it. Ignore me. It wasn't in my book, but I read it as a separate short book.
All right, okay. So,
fascinating.
Hand up for context. It's a short story set in one of the fishing towns about 13 years ago, or whenever it was, before the war. And it's about a young boy who falls in love with one of the spackle, and the spackle is in love with him. And it's all about how the rest of the townspeople are very much against this. And he's like, no, but I really like her. We want to live together. And they're going, no, there's a war coming. She's the enemy. And you get a very interesting look at a slightly younger Coyle as well, because she's involved in what she does in this. So what I was going to say is that it's really interesting to see a different take on the spackle and how the... Oh, hello, I have chips. Thank you.
We loved it. This is like that time where I got lemon meringue pie.
What?
Mine came in from above for one of the skullduggery chats. There was just lemon meringue pie. My dad just dropped it in. I was like, oh, thank you.
See, Mum just went to the chip shop and texted me and went, do you want some chips? And I was like, yes, please.
Incredible.
I've got shortbread and now chips. This is ridiculous.
Perfection. Yeah, I think that seeing Coyle at that point in time and seeing the different way that she reacts to how she has been reacting as a part of the answer as they are currently in that second book was interesting. It was it wasn't dissimilar, but it was different. And seeing that was interesting. But I also loved seeing kind of the fact that there were spackle human relationships, whether you mean romantic or friendship wise, they were there and people continued regardless. And again, that's a lot of parallels between the Europeans that were colonizing the continent and the indigenous Americans. There were relationships of love and of friendship there that persisted despite the fact that both sides said, no, you should hate the other. Obviously, the indigenous Americans were slightly more justified, but
it it does make me wonder if we are going to see those two again, because obviously with where
I
that
wonder where they went.
Mm.
I guess this is a spoiler section. We're just trying not to spoil it for Hannah, but they depart. Is all you're getting. And as Becca and anyone who has read the short story will understand, I'm curious as to where they went and what impact that could have on the third book.
Because I would love to see like an example of those two, and they've maybe made a society that is more accepting and more. I always put it like Star Trek, in the sense that everyone is okay with each other with the exception of the Klingons, but everyone like lives in harmony and everything else. I'm wondering if there is going to be another continent or something where they are, or something. Because I think that'd be a very sort of, not powerful thing to do, but I think it'd be a very interesting take on it to see like another like society of people where they can get along and show Todd, look, this can happen. Like,
and I feel like them coming out of the woodwork, they would likely, with a Speckle human alliance, they would likely side with the answer. And it would then be it would hammer home like more important parts of the story. I feel like, again, we're adults reading a YA book. I feel like it would kind of hammer home certain parts and be a good message. Doesn't necessarily mean Ness has done it, but I think it could have been a good choice. We shall see.
I mean, the whole way through talking about predictions of the next book, I was watching Olivia's face to see if she was giving anything away, and that woman's poker face is ridiculous.
She never has, she never will.
No. I don't know how she does it.
We just turned our cameras off.
I know. Or Weeping Angel.
Yeah.
And she says, wearing a t-shirt that says, "The angels have the phone box."
Very, 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 very quickly. Hannah, have you read it?
Have I read what?
Heart Full of Hatred.
No, not yet.
Disgraceful.
My copy hasn't arrived yet.
What? That's a hate crime.
What? Yeah, I know.
Where did you get it?
All I'm saying is have tissues.
Good to know.
I didn't need tissues, but I did angrily caps lock message. So
yeah, I mean, you will see it in my vlog. I was not happy. Like, I was not happy. Derek
Landy was like, "Oh, you're gonna hate me for this." I was just so annoyed. The hatred came from annoyance. You're never going to guess it.
No.
There's no way in hell you will guess what happens.
There's 3 things you're never going to guess what happens.
I know one of them. I need you to message me the other 2.
The ending, like the final scene.
Yes.
The thing. And the thing that happens to make that thing happen. As in the unmasking. The 3 things. Jesus Christ.
Yes. Yes.
We're going to stop now, because otherwise we will say something.
I feel like we have been secretive enough.
Yeah.
Hannah is just mildly confused and intrigued.
I am. And I can't wait for us to come back to the Dead Famous Readalong next year when the final book comes out, and we can do. We've got Grimoire we need to do.
Yeah. We could do some catch-up ones in the meantime.
I was thinking if we did Armageddon Out of Here as well, because we never actually did a live show for that one either. Yeah. Armageddon Out of Here, Grimoire, and then the others.
Yeah. I'm down for rereading those.
Hell yeah.
So,
anyway, shall we wrap up this live stream before we talk about other live?
What do you mean?
So, shall we leave it here? Because I think we've discussed everything we possibly can. So, I don't know how to wrap this up. I'll say, I hope everyone who watched this enjoyed this. Catch us again next time for the next one. And leave your ideas down below what you think is going to happen next time. But for now, bye. Please end this time properly like last time.